The grand hall of the Zylothian hive was unlike anything Captain Elias Grant had ever seen. The walls shimmered with bioluminescent veins, pulsing in rhythm with a low, resonant hum that filled the air. The ceiling arched high above, disappearing into a haze of soft, golden light. Around him, hundreds of alien beings, tall, elegant, and insectoid in appearance, moved with a grace that belied their sharp, chitinous limbs. Their iridescent exoskeletons caught the light, casting rainbows across the room. Elias felt out of place in his simple human uniform, a stark contrast to the opulence surrounding him. He had been invited as a guest of honor, a gesture of goodwill between humanity and the Zylothian hive. The invitation had come as a surprise. Humanity's first contact with the Zylothians had been tense, but over the years, a fragile alliance had formed. Elias, as a decorated officer, had been chosen to represent Earth at the Ceremony of Unity, a sacred event held once every decade to celebrate the hive's prosperity and strength. Elias stood at the edge of the crowd, watching as the Zylothians performed intricate dances and rituals. Their movements were hypnotic, a blend of precision and fluidity that spoke of centuries of tradition. He sipped from a goblet filled with a sweet, syrupy liquid that the Zylothians called nectar of the stars. It warmed his chest and made his head feel pleasantly light. As the ceremony progressed, the hum in the air grew louder, more insistent. The crowd parted, forming a path that led to a raised dais at the far end of the hall. Elias's breath caught as the queen emerged. She was magnificent. Her exoskeleton gleamed like polished obsidian, adorned with intricate patterns of gold and silver. Her wings, delicate and translucent, shimmered with every movement. Her eyes, large and multifaceted, glowed with an inner light that seemed to pierce straight through him. She moved with an air of regal authority, her presence commanding the attention of every being in the room. Elias felt a strange pull, a sensation he couldn't quite explain. It was as if the queen's gaze had locked onto him, and he couldn't look away. He told himself it was just curiosity. After all, humans were still a novelty to many alien species. But deep down he knew it was something more. The queen ascended the dais and raised her arms, silencing the room. When she spoke, her voice was melodic, resonating in his mind as much as in his ears. "Welcome, children of the hive," she began. "Today we celebrate the strength of our unity, the bonds that tie us together. But today is also a day of change, a day of new beginnings." Elias shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't sure why, but her words felt personal. He glanced around, but no one else seemed to share his unease. The Zylothians listened with rapt attention, their antennae twitching in anticipation. The queen continued, her gaze sweeping across the crowd before settling on Elias. "For centuries, the hive has thrived under the guidance of its queens. But a queen cannot rule alone. She must have a mate, a partner to stand beside her, to share in her burdens and her triumphs." Elias's heart skipped a beat. He suddenly felt very out of place. "Today," the queen declared, "I have chosen my mate." The room erupted in a chorus of clicks and chirps, a sound Elias recognized as Zylothian applause. He clapped politely, still unsure of what was happening. Then the queen extended a slender, clawed hand in his direction. "Captain Elias Grant of Earth," she said, her voice ringing with authority. "Step forward." Elias froze. This had to be a mistake. He looked around, hoping someone would explain, but the Zylothians only watched him expectantly. Reluctantly, he stepped into the center of the room, his boots echoing against the polished floor. The queen descended from the dais, her movements graceful and deliberate. She stopped in front of him, her towering frame forcing him to tilt his head back to meet her gaze. Up close, her presence was overwhelming. Her scent, a mix of something floral and metallic, filled his senses. "Captain Grant," she said, her voice softer now, almost tender. "You have been chosen as my mate. Will you accept this honor?" Elias's mind raced. This had to be some kind of misunderstanding. He was a human, an outsider. He didn't belong here. But the Queen's gaze held him captive, and he found himself unable to refuse. I don't understand," he stammered. "Why me?" The Queen's mandibles twitched in what he guessed was a smile. "Your courage, your strength, your compassion, these are qualities the Hive values above all else. You are unlike any being I have ever known. You are unique." Elias swallowed hard. He had faced down enemy fleets, navigated treacherous asteroid fields, and survived encounters with hostile aliens. But this was beyond anything he had ever prepared for. I accept," he said, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. The Queen's eyes glowed brighter, and she reached out to touch his face. Her claws were surprisingly gentle against his skin. "Then let it be known," she announced, turning to the crowd, "that Captain Elias Grant of Earth is now my mate, and a member of the Hive." The room erupted in cheers, the sound deafening. Elias felt a mix of emotions: shock, disbelief, and strangely a sense of belonging. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. His life would never be the same. Epilogue. 1 year later. Elias stood on the balcony of the Queen's palace, overlooking the sprawling city of the Hive. The sky was a deep shade of purple, dotted with twin moons that cast a silvery light over the landscape. He had grown accustomed to the sights and sounds of his new home, though there were still moments when it all felt like a dream. The Queen, no, his Queen, stepped up beside him, her presence as commanding as ever. But there was a softness in her gaze when she looked at him, a warmth that had taken him by surprise in the early days of their union. "You seem deep in thought," she said, her voice a soothing melody. Elias smiled. "Just reflecting on how much has changed. A year ago, I was just a guest at your ceremony. Now I'm here." The Queen placed a clawed hand on his shoulder. "And you have proven yourself worthy of the title time and time again. The Hive is stronger with you by my side." Elias felt a swell of pride. It hadn't been easy, adjusting to life in the Hive. There were customs to learn, politics to navigate, and the occasional challenge from those who doubted a human's place among them. But he had faced it all with the same determination that had carried him through his military career. "I never imagined this would be my life," he admitted. "But I wouldn't trade it for anything." The Queen's mandibles twitched in amusement. "Nor would I. You have brought something to the Hive that it has long been missing. A new perspective, a new strength. Together, we will lead the Hive into a new era." Elias turned to face her, his heart swelling with a sense of purpose. He had come to the Zylothian Hive as a guest, but he had found a home. And in the Queen, he had found a partner, a confidant, and a love he never could have imagined. As the twin moons rose higher in the sky, Elias took the Queen's hand in his, their fingers and claws intertwined. Together they stood as equals, ready to face whatever the future held. And for the first time in his life, Elias felt truly complete. The end.